Friday, 5 p.m. Jerusalem time. From NBC Studios. This is NBC Journal with Bassam Zahir and Sana Abu Samra.
President Abbas arrives in New York to head Group of 77 and China.
Israeli settlers destroy 1,000 tree samplings in West Bank village.
Egypt opens Rafah border crossing in one direction. Hello and welcome again. President Mahmoud Abbas arrived in New York on Monday to take over presidency from Egypt of the Group 77 and China during a ceremony to be held at the United Nations General Assembly. Taking the presidency of the G77 by an overwhelming vote in October, with 146 countries voting in favor, was seen as a great advance for the Palestinian efforts to get international recognition. More details in this report.
President Mahmoud Abbas vowed on Tuesday after assuming presidency of the Group of 77 and China at the United Nations headquarters in New York to protect the interest of the group. We assure you that the State of Palestine, in representing the Group of 77 and China on all matters relevant to the group's agenda, will pursue the path paved by previous chairs and will strive to carry forth the legacy and traditions of our group in addressing the challenges before us for achieving progress and prosperity for our peoples and states. He said after assuming the chair of the largest bloc at the UN, which represents 134 countries. Presidential spokesman Nabila Bourdaina said, "This is an important historical event added to the political achievements of the State of Palestine since it joined the UN as an observer state in 2012. He said, "It is also an important achievement to assert the Palestinian identity in the international community, which colonial powers have tried to abolish over many centuries." Saeb Arikat, Secretary General of the Executive Committee of Palestine Liberation Organization, Tuesday described Palestine's assuming chair of the Group of 77 and China as a historic step. Today, President Mahmoud Abbas was handed the annual presidency of the Group 77, a historic step for Palestine that was made by sacrifices of our people and their long struggle for freedom, he said in a press release. President Abbas concludes saying, "We will dedicate our efforts to protecting the interests of group in all its including Africa and with the needed attention for the least developed countries' geographical components, guided by the principle of unity in diversity, small developing island states, middle-income countries, and peoples living under colonial and foreign occupation, so as to ensure no one is left behind." Hanin Bakr, NBC.
President Mahmoud Abbas met with Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General in New York, during which he briefed him at the latest developments in the Palestinian issue, including recent Israeli escalations in the Palestinian territories, particularly in Jerusalem. President Abbas stressed the need to implement the resolutions of the United Nations General Assembly and Security Council, in particular Resolution 2334, as well as the need to provide international protection for the Palestinian people.
PLO Executive Committee member Hanan Ashrawi called on members of American civil society to stand up and speak out courageously against the U.S. administration's unconditional support of Israel and its unilateral and irresponsible measures that are antithetical to the requirements of a just peace and stability. During a meeting with a student delegation at Columbia University, which focused on the latest political, global and regional developments, Ashrawi provided graduate students with a comprehensive assessment of Israel's egregious violations and the United States' unrelenting campaign to provide Israel with continued legal, political, and financial cover.
A Palestinian boy was shot and seriously injured on Friday from Israeli army gunfire during protests at the Gaza border with Israel died on Monday of his wounds. According to medical sources, Abdul Rauf Salha was critically injured and remained in serious condition at hospital until he was pronounced dead on Monday. The Great March of Return protests begin on March 30th and are planned to continue until a 20-year-long Israeli blockade on Gaza is lifted.
Israeli fighter jets carried out airstrikes on multiple locations across the Gaza Strip, causing fire to erupt in some of the sites bombed, but with no human casualties, according to local sources. The airstrikes resulted in damages of various levels to the sites bombed, but did not result in any casualties. The Israeli military claimed that the attacks were in response to the firing of a rocket from Gaza, which landed in an open field in southern Israel.
A Palestinian journalist was injured while dozens of others suffered tear gas suffocation as Israeli forces suppressed the weekly Kfar Qaddum march in Qalqilia. Israeli forces raided Kfar Qaddum, went up rooftops of houses and fired rubber-coated steel bullets and tear gas canisters targeting protesters, injuring photojournalist Jafar Shteye. The Israeli forces blocked off the road after expanding the illegal Israeli settlements of Qudumim in 2003. Forcing village residents to take a bypass road in order to travel to Nablus, which has extended the travel time to Nablus from 15 minutes to 40 minutes, according to Israeli rights group of Beit Salim.
Israeli police released on Monday night 4 employees of the Muslim Waqf department, which is in charge of the Muslim places in Jerusalem, and banned them from being at Al-Aqsa Mosque compound for 1 week, according to Firas Ad-Dips, media officer at the Islamic Waqf department. Israeli police detained the 4 guards as they were leaving the compound after police imposed a siege for several hours on the Dome of the Rock Mosque, which along with Al-Aqsa Mosque make the walled Al-Haram al-Sharif compound, because one of the guards prevented a policeman wearing the Jewish kippah from entering the Dome of the Rock Mosque. The police ended the siege after hundreds of people started gathering at the mosque, demanding the reopening of the mosque for worship.
Israeli forces severally beat up a Palestinian and detained him for a long period of time at Atara Israeli military checkpoint north of Ramallah before letting him pass. The Palestinian, who was identified as Hanthallah al-Sheikh from Jerusalem, Beit Iksa village that Israeli forces stationed at Atara checkpoint stopped his car and confiscated his identity card before severely beating him up and destroying his car under the pretext for searching weapons. The driver sustained cuts and bruises throughout his body.
Israeli settlers on Monday evening blocked the western entrance to the town of Tqoua in Beit Lahem. According to Mayor of Tqoua, Taysir Abu Mifrih, around 50 settlers under the protection of Israeli forces gathered at the western entrance to the town of Tqoua, prevented Palestinians from passing and caused a state of panic among residents. He noted that settlers have recently escalated their arbitrary attacks against the town, the last of which was on Friday when settlers attacked Palestinian registered vehicles with stones.
For the second time in a few days, Israeli settlers ransacked on Monday Palestinian-owned properties and demolished retaining walls in order to open a new settlers-only road to the east of Hebron, according to the Palestinian residents. They reported that settlers from the nearby illegal settlement of Kiryat Arba, carrying firearms, sticks, shovels, and axes, gathered in Wadi al-Hassin and demolished the retaining walls, and landlords had rebuilt after the settlers had destroyed them a few days earlier. Settlers also threatened to kill the residents and owners of the land if they attempt to stop them, claiming to have attained a permission from the Israeli military government to open the side street.
Israeli forces Tuesday detained 26 Palestinians during large-scale raids in various parts of the West Bank, said Palestinian security sources and witnesses. Israeli forces frequently conduct large-scale overnight detention raids almost on a daily basis across the West Bank under the pretext of searching for wanted Palestinians, triggering by that clashes with residents. Israeli military vehicles raided Jenin and Nablus. During their raid into Balata refugee camp, soldiers broke into a workshop that constitutes a main source of income for 7 families and seized equipment which cost around $300,000.
Israeli Ministry of Finance has authorized a plan to illegally annex part of the Palestinian village of Deir Dawan, east of the West Bank. The authorization was revealed by the Land Research Center in Jerusalem on January 10th, which reported that 139 dunums of land is to be seized by local illegal settlements. The resolution comes amid an increased authorization and building of Jewish settlements in the West Bank since U.S. President Donald Trump took place in office 2017. As a result of years and settlement projects and constant violation of international law, over 450,000 illegal settlers now live in the West Bank, in addition to 200,000 others living in occupied East Jerusalem.
A group of Israeli settlers destroyed about 1,000 tree saplings on Sunday afternoon in Burqa village west of the northern occupied West Bank district of Nablus. Ghassan Douglas, an official monitoring settlement activity in northern West Bank, told MAN that Israeli settlers from the illegal Israeli settlement of Homish stormed an area east of Burqa village and destroyed hundreds of tree saplings. Douglas mentioned that the Palestinian Ministry of Agriculture and Burqa's local council cooperated to cultivate the 1,000 tree saplings in the village in order to transform the land into a nature reserve. According to a report by Israeli NGO B'Tselem, Israeli settlers' vandalism in the occupied West Bank is a daily routine and is fully backed by Israeli authorities.
Israeli settlers bulldozed on Tuesday 30 dunums of Palestinian land separated by the apartheid wall of Israel, whereas built in the West Bank in the area of Khirbet Yanun, south of the city of Nablus, according to local sources. Ghassan Douglas, who monitors Israeli settlements activities in the north of West Bank, told Wafa that the settlers raised in the land in order to plant it and eventually seize it, adding that this land belongs to citizens who have been forbidden for accessing it since 2006, when Israel built the apartheid wall. He noted that Yanun lost around 85% of its land due to its settlers' practices, and that is surrounded by 5 illegal settlement outposts.
Egyptian authorities opened Rafah border crossing on the border with the Gaza Strip in one direction to allow entry of travelers from Egypt into the Gaza Strip. The Rafah border crossing was shut down by Egypt on Sunday after the Palestinian Authority pulled out its staff working at the Palestinian side of the border over disputes with Hamas, the de facto authority in Gaza. The crossing was opened in one direction to allow entry of passengers, especially humanitarian cases, in the Strip.
Israel will begin exporting natural gas to Egypt in a few months' time, Israeli Energy Minister Yuval Steins said on Monday. Adding to that, Steins noted that is a key step in the country plans to sell its expanding gas production abroad and bolster diplomatic ties. Steins did not give a specific target for initial exports, but said shipments would be doubled after the huge Leviathan field in the eastern Mediterranean comes fully online in November. Steins said Israeli exports to Egypt were expected to reach 7 billion cubic meters annually over 10 years. About half the exports were expected to be used for Egypt's domestic market and half to be liquefied for re-export. Egypt is hoping to leverage its strategic location bridging Africa and Asia and its well-developed infrastructure to become a trading and distribution center for gas in the region and beyond.
Over 550 academics from across the United States have signed onto the Jewish Voice for Peace academic letter in support of Angela Davis, a renowned academic and human rights activist, condemning the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute for cancelling the Fred Shuttlesworth Human Rights Award intended for Professor Davis because of her pro-Palestinian views. Jewish Voice for Peace also launched a general petition in support of Angela Davis last week, which has garnered over 16,500 signatures, including signatories by Professors Noam Chomsky and Judith Butler, among others.
Storm Norma has hit Lebanon with heavy rains, snowfall, and freezing temperatures, damaging by that several Syrian refugees camps in the country. Thousands are in need of emergency assistance, and many refugees had to spend the night standing up. Some families were stuck in the tents under the snow. The United Nations Refugee Agency, an organization dedicated to saving lives and protecting the rights of refugees, said emergency measures had been put into place to rescue stranded families and help those suffering from the cold. At least 66 camps were heavily impacted by the flooding, 15 of which have been completely flooded or collapsed, and around 300 people have been relocated so far. Lebanon hosts an estimated 1.5 million Syrian refugees, many of whom live in camps that will have little or no infrastructure.
US President Donald Trump announced the beginning of the withdrawal of American troops in Syria, stating that the US military was long overdue to leave the Syrian land. He expressed readiness to continue the attacks of the terrorist group Islamic State. Trump also addressed a harsh statement to Turkey, adding on Twitter, "If Turkey attacks the Kurds, we will ruin them economically, but Kurds should not provoke Turks."
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Qatar Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani signed a memorandum on the expansion of the U.S. air base in Qatar, Interfax reports. The U.S. Secretary of State previously stated that the base is currently receiving 13,000 U.S. troops. In addition, Pompeo said that Washington is counting on the formation of the alliance of 6 Gulf states, as well as Jordan and Egypt.
And now moving to An-Najah National University's news. An-Najah professor concludes a scientific visit to China. As part of planning industrial zones in the Middle East and Palestine cooperation project, which was signed between An-Najah and Southeast University in China, Dr. Ali Abdel Hamid, Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies at An-Najah, concluded the scientific visit to Nanning and Beijing. During his visit, Dr. Abdel Hamid attended the project's annual meeting, which was also attended by An-Najah and CEU representatives of the Chinese Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development, the Belt and Road Initiative, which funds the project, as well as a number of Chinese companies that implement industrial cities projects in the Middle East. The meeting aimed at exhibiting the annual report results and the project's future plans, as well as discussing financing opportunities for industrial planning projects in the Middle East region, including Palestine.
An-Najah's International Offices Debate Society initiates the Education Throughout Debate workshop for Palestinian educators. The workshop introduced 55 secondary and university-level educators within Palestine to the format of competitive debate for the purpose of providing them with the educational tools to integrate debate activities within their classrooms. The trainings included an introduction to the debate motions, methods, and techniques for applying them on the various academic subjects, as well as the components of strong arguments. The workshop concluded steps for introducing debate activities into classrooms and suggested debate activities that teachers can utilize. NUDS plans to send the first debate team to present Palestine at the World University Debate Championship, the largest academic and debate event in the world.
These are the news of the week. Thank you for watching. For more details, visit our website, nn.ps.
See you next Friday.